Okay, today we're going to be looking at the veal and sweet pepper sandwich. If you've ever been to Dufferin and St. Clair, you know what I'm talking about. The first thing that we're going to need to do is make a quick marinara sauce. We're going to start with a sweet onion. We're going to chop it in half, dice it up. We're looking for about 1 cup of sweet onion. Then we're going to add this to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we're going to sweat it for a few minutes until it's nice and soft. We don't want any color on this, so we don't want to cook it on too high of a heat, or it'll get brown on it and our sauce won't look nice. So just a medium heat, take your time, and sweat it till it's soft and translucent. Next, we're going to add some garlic. Give it a whack with the flat of your knife, dice it up, and then we're going to add that to the sauce. Make sure your sauce is on a nice low heat. If it's too hot, you're going to burn the garlic, and your whole sauce is going to taste like burnt garlic, which is no bueno. Now that we've softened up the onions and the garlic, it's time to tip in our tomatoes. We're going to be adding 24 ounces of San Marzano tomatoes. We're going to let those cook, and as they cook, we're going to break them up a little bit with our spoon. We don't want this to be a really heavy, thick sauce, so we're not going to simmer it for a long time. Low heat, 15 minutes at the most, and we're going to end up with a light and bright rustic sauce that's going to be perfect for our sandwich. To finish our marinara sauce, we're going to take 6 basil leaves, roll them up, and then we're going to slice them chiffonade, which is a really fine, long, thin cut that we're going to throw into the sauce. It's going to look nice, and it's going to add lots of bright flavor to our sauce. Stir in the basil, let it simmer for a couple more minutes, then we're going to put that off to the side while we work on our pepper mix for the veal sandwich. For the pepper mix for our sauce, we're going to need some sweet bell peppers. There's lots of red in the sauce, so I'm using an orange and yellow one here. Pro tip for slicing them, stand them up on the end, slice down along the sides, and then slice off the bottom. What you're going to be left with is a nice clean package of all the stuff that you don't need, the seeds and the white membrane. There's still going to be a little bit of white membrane on the peppers, so we're just going to clean that up a little bit so our sauce is nice and pretty. We're going to be slicing our peppers julienne, which is long and thin. When you're cutting, keep the tip of the knife on the cutting board. Slice down and forward and use your index finger as a guide. This way, you won't be slicing your fingers when you're slicing your peppers. We're going to add 1 red onion to our pepper mix. Just like the onion in the sauce, slice it in half, take the skin off, and then this one we're going to slice julienne. We're not going to dice it, we're just going to slice it long and thin, just like the peppers. To julienne an onion, we're going to place the cut side flat on the cutting board, and then we're going to slice from the outside of the onion towards the center of the onion. Doing this, we're going to have a nice stable surface to work with, and all the cuts are going to be the same length, so it'll look nice. Now that we've got our peppers and onions sliced up, we're going to heat 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a pan, get that nice and hot, and then we're going to saute the peppers and onions together over high heat for about 5 or 6 minutes. We want to start getting some color on them, a little bit of browning on the edges, and they'll be nice and soft and ready to go into our sauce. Uncle Roger says, never use metal tongs on a non-stick pan. Thanks, Uncle Roger. Okay, here you can see the peppers are almost ready. They've softened up. You're starting to see a little bit of browning on the edges, a little bit of browning on the onions, and they're just about ready to go. We got one more thing we got to add to this before we put it into our sauce. We've sliced up a couple of banana peppers, and we're just going to tip those in to our pepper mix here. That's going to add just a little bit of zing to it. If you like it hotter, put some more in. If you don't like it so hot, you can leave these out. But this is going to add a really nice flavor and just a touch of heat to our tomato sauce that we're going to put on the veal sandwich. Here we've got our marinara sauce that we made earlier, and to that we're going to add in our pepper mix that's been cooked down and sauteed, and we're just going to give that a good stir to combine it, and then I'll set that to the side while we work on our veal. Okay, here we have our veal cutlet. We want to get this nice and thin, so we have a few options on how we want to do that. Some people like to use a frying pan, just give it a little whack. Some people like to use a meat mallet, or your handy dandy rolling pin works just fine. You need to remember, when you're pounding out your veal, you're not pounding it. You're just giving it a little tap. You're trying to make it a little bit flatter and nice and even. If you hit it too hard, you're just going to split it into a bunch of pieces, and that's no good. Now we need to set up our breading station. Now traditionally, breading stations go left to right, but my camera was on the other side. So this breading station is going to go right to left. We're going to start with some flour. Our flour we're going to season with some salt and pepper. Then we're going to have an egg wash. An egg wash is just an egg and a little bit of milk beaten together. Uncle Roger says, use your chopsticks to beat the milk and the egg together. Thanks, Uncle Roger. And then we're going to have our breadcrumbs. You can use panko flakes or breadcrumbs, whichever you like. For this recipe, we're going to be using an Italian-styled breadcrumb. To bread the veal, first we're going to put it in the flour. Give it a good coating of flour. This is going to help everything else stick to the veal cutlet. Once we've got it well coated in flour, we're going to move it over to the egg wash. The egg wash and the flour are going to combine, and essentially they're going to make a food glue. This is what is going to allow the breadcrumbs to stick to the veal cutlet. You can see at this point, we've completely abandoned the wet hand, dry hand method for breading a cutlet. We're pretty much breading our fingers, along with the veal. We're going to heat some oil in a frying pan to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we want enough oil that it's going to come up the sides of the veal, but not so much oil that it's going to go over the top of the veal. We call this technique shallow fat frying. If the oil is too hot, the breadcrumbs are going to burn before the veal cooks. If the oil's too cold, your cutlet's going to come out greasy. So it's really important we get to the right temperature. Once we've got the oil to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, we're going to lay the veal away from us gently into the oil so we don't splash. We're going to cook the veal to a golden brown on both sides. You're going to know it's time to flip the veal when you start to see the juices coming up through the top of the breadcrumbs and you start to see a little bit of browning around the edges of the veal cutlet. Be really careful when you flip the veal. You want to gently grab it with your tongs and gently turn it over and lay it away from you again into the hot oil. Once the veal is crispy and golden brown on both sides, take it out of the pan, put it on a plate, and it's time to build our sandwich. We're going to start this sandwich build with some fresh Parmesan cheese right on top of our breaded veal cutlet. By putting the cheese on top of the cutlet and then adding the sauce, we keep the cutlet nice and crispy, because there's nothing worse than a soggy veal sandwich. There's fake Parmesan cheese, so when you're buying it, look for these two symbols, the DOC and the Parmesan cheese symbol, and that way you know you're getting the real stuff. Give that authentic Parmesan cheese a quick melt under the broiler, and then we're ready to top it off with our sauce. While our cheese is melting under the broiler, we're going to toast our buns. Melt a little bit of butter in a pan, firmly place the buns down on top of the butter, and let sit until nice and golden brown and toasted. And now we're ready for final assembly. We're going to place our Parmesan cheese crusted breaded veal cutlet atop our buttery toasted roll. We're going to top our cutlet with an excessive layer of our sweet pepper marinara sauce, a little more of that authentic Parmesan cheese on top of our bell pepper sauce. And there you have it, quite possibly the tastiest and the messiest sandwich known to mankind.